Total War Warhammer 2, and 1 for that matter, and as well, I guess subsequently 3 when that comes out, are filled to the brim with units, with characters, with all these special heroes and lords, but there are some of these lords that are missing. Tabletop does have a wide range of books pertaining to every single army, as you guys well know. And especially in Total War Warhammer 2, Creative Assembly did a really good job of representing almost every single unit. Like, we take a look at the Tomb Kings, I think for the exception of Tomb Swarms, the little carrion swarms, there's pretty much every single unit in that book in the game. And the rosters for the Total War Warhammer 2 races in general are a little more complete, minus of course Griffins for High Elves, but I swear to God I'm not fucking bitter about that still. But what I want to talk about here today is two units that are not in Total War Warhammer, namely Total War Warhammer 1. And we did this before with like the Jabberslith and the such, but I want to talk about the Ghorgons and the Spirit Hosts today. The Ghorgons are a Beastmen, a large unit. They were a dual kit with the Cygor, and then the Vampire Counts Spirit Hosts. So we will talk about their lore, go into a little bit about their special rules, as well as how I might think they would be included into Total War Warhammer. So let's start off with the Ghorgons, and this one really I think is a fan favorite, and you guys were asking me to do this for quite some time, so here is the fan service thou dost receive. So here's for the Ghorgons. When the Beastmen go to war, they are accompanied by sickening fiends that have grown to impossible dimensions on a diet of raw flesh and warping magic. The Ghorgon is such a beast, a many-limbed, ox-headed slaughterer possessed of an urgent need to devour and destroy. A near-mythical creature, even amongst the war herds themselves, it is well that these blood brutes are so rare, for even one Ghorgon can consume an entire Beastman tribe in a single, frenzied and terrifying night. Ghorgons are the ultimate carnivores, driven to devour anything they can catch, the meatier the better. It is thought amongst the Bray shamans that the Ghorgons began life as the largest minotaurs in their tribe, warrior lords who chose gluttony over leadership. Cannibals all, each has devoured his lesser kin in a vile feast, and hence the accumulated bloodlust that built in their hearts has reached a fever pitch that consumes them in turn. All beastmen know that to subsist upon lean, muscled flesh is to grow strong and to inherit the power of those upon which they feed. The Ghorgons embody this belief. They have grown tall and broad beyond measure upon the meat of the Minotaurs, and hence they are the strongest of all the denizens of the dark woods. Such is the monstrous vileness of these creatures, that they must surely have consumed the tainted as well as the true. Some whisper that it is not just ton upon ton of raw flesh that the Ghorgons consume, but also the baleful glowing shards of wordling stone that nestle in the cankerous depths of the blighted forests. Perhaps the nature of the twisted beasts upon which the Ghorgons feast has burgeoned forth in a fleshy tribute to the chaos of the deep woods. Either way, Ghorgons bear grotesque mutations that aid them in their eternal quest to wolf down those that they catch. A Ghorgon usually has at least 4 arms, 2 typically ending in bony blades, like those of axes or cleavers, the better to carve the prey, and 2 ending in great grasping hands, so the blood brute can shovel the bodies of its victims into its slobbering maw. Some have fang-lined mouths in place of their hearts, or are covered head to foot in gnashing jaws that wail and bellow with unholy hunger. Ghorgons have flaring nostrils that twitch and sniff at the scent of blood, able to function equally well be it night or day. So sensitive is a Ghorgon's sense of smell that a careless wanderer in the woods may see 2 odd-looking tree trunks up ahead and approach closer, only to find a giant hand thrust down through the forest canopy as the Ghorgon snatches up its unfortunate victim and gobbles him down whole. It is only the most gifted shamans who can channel the Ghorgon's insatiable lust for flesh into the ranks of the enemy, but the psychotic displays of violence and destruction that ensure all well worth a few dozen of the warherd in the meantime. So these guys mean some business, as you can tell. I mean, they really look like giant minotaurs. They have these giant, huge models too, and as you have heard, 4 arms, cleavers, axes, all sorts of crazy, grotesque, cruel shit with these guys. And the Ghorgons are basically, if you got the giant, which is this lumbering, like slow, kind of unwitting destroyer of worlds, Then the Ghorgon is basically the destroyer of universes. Like, this thing is huge. It's just going to beat down people's houses. It's a Cygor with actual, well, really good close combat capabilities. It's got frenzy. It's immune to psychology. It creates terror. So it has a lot of stuff going for it. It also has the same blood greed, not Greek, capability that the Minotaurs have. So we're going to basically see a souped up version of a Minotaur. What about its special rules? So I did say it has blood greed, just like the Minotaurs have. And blood greed in the tabletop is a bit different, but how we actually see it computed already in Total War Warhammer 1 is it increases speed, increases leadership, and gives it immune to psychology, which again it already has in the special rule profile. So a really cool nod right there. And I'm pretty, you know what? I'm pretty okay with that. The way blood greed's supposed to work is the more that they're in combat, they become frenzied immediately. So this is a really nice way to kind of give a nod to that while also giving them frenzy to increase their close combat capabilities. So again, I'm totally fine with that. Now, we did hear about how they can essentially devour an entire herd, right? They can kill entire units. Well, they do have a special rule called Swallow Whole. And the way that this actually works is, it's kind of interesting. So basically, rather than doing all of its attacks, it's got 6 attacks in tabletop. So it really doles out the hate. And rather than using all 6 of them, it can use one of them and deliver one attack that has a killing blow special rule. Now, tabletop's killing blow meant that you rolled a d6, and if you wounded on a 6, you killed the model outright, unless they had a ward save and they could save against it. Now, the way Swallow Whole works is you get a killing blow on a 4, 5, or a 6. Now, I want this to be a little bit more thematic because there's a different... Before we discuss how this could be in Total War Warhammer, let's read the next rule, which is Strength from Flesh. And basically any unit that gets hit by Swallow Whole, that they do kill outright with Swallow Whole, the Ghorgon rolls a d3 and recovers that many wounds. So I'd love to see this work for, let's say, units below 25% health, right? We already see this with Wargrave, how he can target units and pretty much outright gib them and turn them into Chaos Spawn. Or, I'm sorry, with not units, but with actual characters, is it? I never remember which one it is, if it's with characters or with units. But I think Swallow Whole would be really cool is if it did work with units. If you could cast it on a unit and it would kill it outright if it was maybe below 25 or 20 or 15%. And it could kill it outright and heal him a little bit. And it was on a pretty long recycle because, I mean, that's a pretty OP capability. Like, if you were to use it on, say, like a unit of Grail Knights or a Regiment of Renown that's, you know, well over 2,000 points, you can get your money's worth pretty fast there. Maybe you can only target units, not individual characters, not individual large creatures. It has to be of the small or infantry designation in Total War Warhammer. That's at least I think a really cool way to do it. Or maybe it just gets health from its damage abilities, which I think is kind of a cop-out. I like the Swallow Whole ability, and I think it would be really cool if there was an animation attached to it. Maybe he just jumps on over things and just rips them apart and throws them into his mouth or something like that. Something just really grotesque. And since they're going to have to start doing some of these eating mechanics with Total War Warhammer 3, why not start with the Ghorgon and use that as kind of like your guinea pig and to say, hey, this is how we're going to try this eating mechanic. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't, we'll scrap it. We know ahead of time coming into Total War Warhammer 3. Now, there's no saying that Ghorgon's even coming into the game, but I just want to cover some of these units that are missing. These units that you guys do want to know about it, and you do wish were in the game already. But that is our lovely Ghorgon of the Beastmen. Let's jump on over now to our vampire counts and talk about the spirit hosts. Now, I mean, I personally love the spirit hosts. They were one of the very first units I was exposed to with the vampire counts, because I was a big Bretonnian player, a big high elf player in the early days of 4th or 5th edition, I never remember. Came into the Warhammer 40,000 at 4th and Warhammer Fantasy at 5th, so 5th edition. It was ethereal units, and the spirit hosts are ethereal units, so that was my first exposure to ethereal units. I was like, man, these guys are really cool. They seem super overpowered, because in tabletop, you can't hit them at all unless you have a magic weapon. Well, at least that was the rule in 5th edition. And it made fighting them really hard, especially if you were new to the game, didn't really think about putting magic weapons and things. So you would have a chance of not hitting these guys outright. But the spirit hosts serve a really good entry point or talking point into the swarm troop type that I think we're going to need to see more of, and we should see more of throughout the entirety of the Total War Warhammer universe. But let's talk about their lore, and we'll talk about that special rule, because they don't really have any special rules outside of the fact that they are swarms and that they're ethereal. So let's talk about that. Across Sylvania, poltergeists and ghosts haunt peasants with dreadful groans and freezing touches, sometimes driving whole villages to be abandoned as a result. When the vampire counts go to war, these restless spirits are pulled along with the dark magic of the undead army. Insubstantial and impervious to mortal weapons, these angry ghosts swarm over the enemy, leeching energy from the living and leaving stark horror in their wake. Sylvania is rich in the spirits of the dead, for it has a long history of misery and suffering, and is rife with polluting warpstone. As well as animating the physical remains of the dead, this sorcerous energy also has an effect on the souls of the departed. When Vlad von Karstein cast out the priests of Mor, wardens of the dead, he ensured that the spirits of those who had died could not pass into the afterlife. Since then, the unquiet spirits can often be seen as mournful, swirling mists, through which protrude mournful, wailing faces and grasping hands. Their touch draws some of a victim's soul into the underworld, dragging them into a waking nightmare or stealing their knowledge of who they are. Only a priest of Mor can restore the mind of one who has had his spirit drained by a ghost, and survivors of the process are rare. All the peoples of the Empire share a common view of what happens to the souls of the dead. They pass into the underworld, the land of Mor, god of death. Priests of Mor and wizards of the Amethyst College have been known to contact a soul in the underworld and remind it of its former life, strengthening the soul's grip on its memories. The mortal can then commune with that spirit and learn of things that have passed and things that are not yet to pass. The Empire's citizens also believe that sometimes Mor will close the gates of the underworld and forbid a spirit from entering. He may do this if it is not that individual's time to pass beyond the veil, for instance, or the person has sworn an oath that they have not yet fulfilled. These souls burn brightly in the underworld and disturb the other spirits, and so Mor banishes them back to the realm of the living, condemning them to a shade-like existence until their duty is done. It is these tortured spirits that can be called forth by the necromantic power of a vampire, channeling dark magic so that the roaming ghosts can manifest themselves. Necromancers must undergo a stranger process still to bind the souls of men, sending their own spirits to the underworld of Mor. Once there, they can steal a few souls, snatching them from under the gaze of the god of the dead. However, sometimes Mor catches these interlopers, imprisoning them for eternity. Their body falls into a catatonic state and then slowly rots away, while their soul suffers anguish without end. On the field of battle, these vengeful apparitions cluster together into hosts that drift slowly towards their warm-blooded victims with terrible inevitability. Even a cannonball strike will not damage a spirit host, for they exist only partially in this world. However, their twilight state does anything but render these spirits harmless. The ghost of a cursed man can claw at a mortal's flesh with long, taloned hands, stilling the victim's beating heart with a touch and killing him outright, even as his eyes widen in shock. Even though I hissed as I said that S word there, huh? But the Spirit Host is not anything crazy, right? It just has got 4 attacks, 4 wounds, strength and toughness of 3, and weapon strength of 3, weapon skill of 3. So it even has a 4 leadership. So this thing is not crazy. It doesn't do heaps and heaps and heaps of damage. But it is a swarm. So you can have a lot of these at a very cheap rate in the army. And this is something I think we need to see more. They've done a really good job, though, of not including these. They kind of have bats as suiting that purpose of the swarm harassment unit. But an army that doesn't have the staying power of normal troops usually has a lot of really cool swarms. Or they've got swarms that are very supplemental to some of the weaknesses in their army. We take a look at the jungle swarms. They've got the Skaven rat swarms. They've got giant rats, which are not really a swarm, but still there are plenty of swarms in this game. The Nurglings are little swarm units that we'll probably be seeing in Total War Warhammer 3 when they incorporate Chaos Demons and Nurgle. So I think we need to see some more of these swarms. You get little Snotlings or whatever from Ogre Kingdoms that are swarms. I think there's Hobgoblin swarms as well for the Chaos Dwarves. So these swarm units are a very integral part of the tabletop, and the Spirit Host is a pretty terrifying swarm unit because it has the harassment capability of a swarm unit as a whole, but with its ethereal special rule, it is far harder to kill and way more obtrusive on the battlefield because they can lock down a unit that has 0 to no actual magic capability. So if you were to get this into a backline, hypothetical, and it were to attack some archers in tabletop, those archers are pinned down until something comes to kill those spirit hosts off because they can't do anything about the ethereal special rule. Now, the ethereal special rule has changed many times, in many editions, and now they kind of represent it very well, I think, in Total War with 75% physical resistance. Now, I think that would be still. It needs to be maybe upped a little bit. Maybe these guys cause terror too on top of it. They are undead, so they would naturally cause fear. But imagine putting the spirit host into the game as some way to kind of really mitigate a lot of the backline play that the vampire counts have. I mean, they've taken some of the other units that aren't really necessarily hugely present and put them into that backline harassment role. You know, I've got the hounds that kind of jump into the background and do a lot of that backline action for the vampire counts, and that's all well and good and all, but I just love the swarm units and I love the spirit hosts, so I'm kind of biased in wanting them in the game, even though I think that maybe they're totally, you know, cumbersome and not necessarily useful, or they already have a role that's better filled by the hounds already, or the bat swarms and the dire wolves, who knows. But I think that the swarms do need to come into Total War Warhammer some way or another, and I think the Spirit Host is a really good swarm in and of itself, just because it is really cool, really thematic, and it kind of, it's one thing that's kind of lacking from the armies of Vampire Counts. When you look at a Vampire Counts army, it's a lot of beasts and undead creatures, right? You got skeletons, you got zombies, but part of what makes a vampire-led dead army are these hosts of spirits coming, you know, writhing up from the ground, and it kind of makes a very picturesque image of what a Vampire Counts army looks like. So I think it just kind of, it misses that little panache, as you will, a little tiny cherry on top. But hope you guys enjoyed these two little forays into what are missing from Total War Warhammer 1, 2, 3. I've got some other units I want to talk about, like griffins and the such, and if you want to hear about more units that are not in the game, go ahead and comment below. Let me know what you're really jonesing for, and I'll get it added onto this here list. But as always, guys, thanks so much here for watching today. We'll be doing a stream on Friday morning, so be on the lookout for that. Been doing some more Bretonnia campaign as we reunite Bretonnia and then take on the Crusader Kingdoms. We'll unite them. We're gonna go down to Araby. But as always, guys, again, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Have a good one, and take care.